The biting chill of that South Bethany October morning didn't just seep into my bones, it mirrored the frigid truth seeping into my very soul. At 75 years young, I, Brianna Bree Hayes, had navigated life's currents long enough to discern that the most insidious deceptions often gleam beneath the most polished veneers. My odyssey, as it unfolded, was far from its quiet sunset. Rather, it was a prelude to a stunning crescendo. What initially appeared as an unexpected windfall would swiftly unravel into a chilling tapestry of calculated betrayal, a plot so audacious it would leave you gasping. Prepare yourself, because this isn't merely a tale, it's the raw, unvarnished chronicle of how an unassuming grandmother transformed into an improbable avenger, and why some family secrets, once unearthed, are best left undisturbed. You simply won't believe the depths of what came next. I peered through the rain-streaked window at the gunmetal-gray October sky hanging over South Bethany. Each heavy droplet clung to the glass, distorting the familiar outline of the Golden Years assisted living facilities parking lot into an impressionist blur. 75 years old, I mused, my fingers smoothing the already flat creases of my worn, flannel housecoat. 75 years old, and here I was, residing within walls painted an indistinguishable beige, permeated by the cloying scent of artificial lavender, the facility's desperate attempt to mask the inevitable aroma of stale age and pharmaceuticals. "Mrs. Hayes, you skipped breakfast," Darla's head popped into my doorway. She was a young nurse, her ponytail perpetually askew, her notebook a silent testament to her diligent tracking of resident compliance. We were quite concerned. "At my venerable age, I've earned the distinct privilege of foregoing oatmeal if the spirit moves me," I retorted, my gaze still fixed on the dreary outside. I harbored a quiet fondness for Darla. She was one of the rare few who met the eyes of the elderly, rather than looking straight through them as if we were transparent. "Please inform Paul I'll grace them with my presence at lunch." Darla gave a quick nod, her figure receding, leaving behind a fleeting trace of berry-flavored gum and inexpensive perfume. I sighed, letting my eyes drift to the framed photographs meticulously arranged on my dresser. Rex, my beloved husband, radiated warmth from the largest one. The snapshot had been taken the year before his passing, during our 40th wedding anniversary celebration in Lake Tahoe. His eyes, a vibrant, piercing blue, seemed to follow my every movement within the confines of the room. "You would have detested this place," I murmured, a silent conversation with his image. "You always insisted you'd draw your last breath in our own home." "You, my dear, were fortunate." Memories of Rex's final days enveloped me like a suffocating shroud. Pancreatic cancer had claimed him with brutal swiftness. A mere 4 months separated his diagnosis from his funeral. 4 agonizing months that had violently wrenched my meticulously ordered life into a chaotic abyss of profound grief. After his death, our sprawling 3-story Victorian, the very heart of our shared existence for nearly our entire married life, had become unbearably cavernous. Every room echoed with the faint ghosts of whispered arguments and tender reconciliations, the joyful sounds of Orson's childhood, the quiet rustle of pages turned during evening readings, and the boisterous laughter of friends during celebratory gatherings. I clung to this veritable crypt of memories for almost 3 long years before the weight of it became too much, and I decided to sell. The real estate agent, a woman whose sharp, angular features were softened only by a faint whisper of lemon scent, assured me the house would fetch a handsome sum. "Young families are drawn to houses with a rich history," she'd chirped, her camera clicking away as she prepared the listing, "and this house, Mrs. Hayes, undeniably possesses one." The bitter irony was that I, the living embodiment of its history, no longer fit within its venerable walls. When the sale finally closed, I felt an unsettling blend of relief and a peculiar sense of betrayal, as if I had not merely sold a property, but had somehow bartered away the very essence of my life with Rex. Orson, my sole child, had extended an invitation for me to move in with him and his wife, Gabrielle, in their 2-story suburban mansion. I politely declined. I could all too clearly discern the subtle shift in Gabrielle's expression at the mere contemplation of her mother-in-law invading their meticulously curated space, the barely perceptible tightening at the corners of her lips when Orson voiced the offer. That almost imperceptible pause before she managed to force out a strained smile and declare, "Of course, Bree, we'd be absolutely delighted." Instead, I opted for Golden Years, a respectable, middle-class assisted living facility in South Bethany. It was sufficiently far from Orson to avoid being a perpetual burden, yet close enough for the occasional visit, which I noted with a growing ache, were becoming increasingly sporadic. For the first year, Orson had been a fixture, visiting every weekend. He'd arrive bearing a box of my favorite chocolates, the ones with almonds and coconut, his conversation filled with updates on his work, the weather, the new car he and Gabrielle had acquired that spring. Gabrielle, meanwhile, would accompany him perhaps once a month, always immaculately coiffed, her voice invariably tinged with a subtle impatience, her apologies for their brevity always identical. "We have dinner plans with Orson's colleagues. I promised to stop by my parents' place. I simply must prepare for a crucial presentation tomorrow." The specific excuses varied, but the underlying message remained chillingly consistent. I was an obligation to be discharged, not a person to be cherished. By the second year, their visits had dwindled to a paltry 1 or 2 a month. By the third, Orson's appearances were a monthly occurrence, sometimes even less. Face-to-face meetings began to be replaced by phone calls, initially lengthy conversations filled with detailed narratives of his life and genuine inquiries about mine. But then, they became progressively shorter. "Sorry, Mom, I'm in a meeting. I'll call you back later." The later never materialized. By the fourth year, I had effectively been reduced to a mere checklist item in his life. Call Mom. Check. Mother's Day flowers and card. Check. Birthday phone call and courier-delivered gift. Check. I had become a ghost in my own son's existence. This insidious sense of invisibility, I soon realized, permeated other facets of my life. Sales associates in department stores would look right through me, their attention immediately drawn to younger customers. Waiters in restaurants would address questions to my younger companions, completely bypassing me. Even doctors would speak to me with a patronizing condescension, as if my age had automatically diminished my mental faculties. I even conducted an informal experiment once. I deliberately stood at the information desk of a bustling downtown bookstore for a full 10 minutes. 3 employees passed by, eagerly assisting other patrons, before a young man with a rather scruffy beard finally noticed my presence. "Can I help you find something, Grandma?" he asked. Grandma. Not ma'am, not Mrs., but Grandma. An utterly impersonal label that effectively erased my entire being. A dedicated math teacher with 3 decades of experience, a passionate advocate who marched for civil rights in the 60s, a woman who once triumphed in a regional chess tournament, a wife, a mother, a unique individual. All reduced to a single, dismissive word: grandmother. At Golden Years, at least I retained my name. Bree Hayes, resident of room 213, fond of peppermint tea and New York Times crossword puzzles, utterly averse to oatmeal and group yoga classes. Yet, even here, the sensation of being invisible often crept in, just one among a multitude of gray-haired, wrinkled-handed older women, easily interchangeable in the dining hall. A sharp rap on my door jolted me from my reverie. Mrs. Hayes, Paul, the receptionist, a middle-aged man with a nascent bald spot and perpetually weary eyes, cautiously peered into the room. "You have a visitor." My brow furrowed in surprise. It was Wednesday, a mundane weekday. Orson never visited on weekdays. "Who?" I inquired, absently patting my hair into place. "Jennifer Walsh," Paul replied. "She's waiting for you in the visitor's room." Jennifer Walsh. The name stirred a faint echo in my memory, but I couldn't quite place it. Perhaps a former colleague from my teaching days, or a member of the book club I'd belonged to before my relocation here. I quickly slipped into a respectable navy blue dress, applied a touch of lipstick, and made my way to the visitor's room. A woman in her early 50s awaited me, clad in a severe business suit and clutching a sleek leather folder. "Mrs. Hayes." She rose gracefully as I entered. "Thank you for seeing me. I'm Jennifer Walsh from the law firm of Baker, Hammond and Associates. We're handling the estate of your sister, Alice Price. Alice. My older sister, with whom I hadn't exchanged a single word in nearly 2 decades. Our last encounter had dissolved into a bitter quarrel over our parents' inheritance, a petty, foolish dispute that had, over time, calcified into an unbridgeable chasm. Has something happened to Alice? I asked, though a cold dread already told me the answer. Lawyers rarely bring good tidings. I regret to inform you, but your sister passed away 3 weeks ago, Jennifer stated, her voice devoid of inflection. Lung cancer. Terminal. It was all very sudden. Something clenched within my chest. Alice. My imperious, fiercely opinionated, brilliantly sharp sister. The one who always held the definitive solution, always remained one step ahead, always had the last word. Dead. And I hadn't even known she was ill. Why wasn't I informed? My voice was sharper than I intended, laced with raw pain. She explicitly forbade it, Jennifer replied simply. She stated she didn't wish for you to see her in that state. However, she did amend her will just a week before her passing. Jennifer opened her folder and produced a sheaf of papers. Mrs. Price bequeathed to you this sealed envelope containing a letter and her personal savings, $300,000 in liquid cash. She specifically insisted on cash, which is why it took our firm some time to facilitate the transfer. She placed the sealed envelope on the table between us, continuing to elaborate on the will's intricate details, but her words faded into a meaningless drone. $300,000 in cash. From the sister who had deliberately excised me from her life for 20 years. The remainder of the day passed in an ethereal haze. I mechanically affixed my signature to the requisite paperwork, accepted the envelope containing the letter, and made arrangements for the substantial sum of money to be delivered. An almost absurd amount of cash that Jennifer had obligingly offered to transport to a safety deposit box of my choosing. Back in the sanctuary of my room, I gazed at the sealed envelope for an extended period, my heart thrumming, before I finally summoned the courage to open it. Inside lay a single sheet of paper, covered in Alice's distinctive, angular script. Dear Bree, if these words reach you, it means I am no longer among the living. And in a way, I suppose it's a fitting final act to our protracted narrative. I always did have to have the last word, didn't I? Even if it required my own demise to achieve it. I know, with crystalline clarity now, that we squandered 2 decades in a senseless, petty feud. From this vantage point, staring into the approaching void, it all seems so utterly trivial. What significance does a grandmother's heirloom tea set or a father's cherished pocket watch truly hold when weighed against 20 years of deafening silence? The funds I've allocated to you are my atonement, my attempt at a belated redemption. Not that mere money can mend every fracture, but I ardently hope it grants you the liberty, the freedom, that I, ironically, always seem to lack. I devoted my entire existence to accumulating for a future that, ultimately, never arrived. Please do not replicate my profound error. Your sister, Alice. I clutched the letter tightly to my chest, allowing myself to truly weep for the first time in years, not the quiet, dignified tears I'd shed when Rex died, but raw, convulsive sobs that shook my entire frame. When the wellspring of tears finally dried, an odd sense of liberation washed over me. It was as if a crushing weight that had compressed my chest for so long had, at last, dislodged itself. And with that release came a stark, unwavering resolution. For years, I had steadily faded into obscurity, first, in the eyes of society, then, regrettably, in the lives of my son and his wife, and most recently, it seemed, even to myself. But Alice's substantial bequest had irrevocably altered the landscape. $300,000, a sum potent enough to redefine everything. A nascent strategy crystallized in my mind almost instantaneously. I wouldn't simply announce the inheritance to Orson over the phone. No. Instead, I would materialize at his doorstep unannounced, the money a potent, silent companion. Alongside a carefully crafted offer, I would bestow a portion of it upon him, reserving the remainder for my own future contingencies. This, I decided, would be my irrefutable opportunity to reclaim visibility in his life, a chance to meticulously reconstruct a relationship that had slowly, inexorably, crumbled into dust over the long years. The taxi glided to a halt before an imposing two-story mansion, its red brick facade punctuated by pristine white columns. As I observed my son's residence through the car window, an unsettling sensation washed over me, as if I were visiting a meticulously curated museum rather than a cherished family dwelling. The flawlessly trimmed shrubs, the impeccably manicured lawn, the strategically placed ornamental lights illuminating the driveway, every element screamed either immense wealth and impeccable taste, or, in my seasoned opinion, an astronomical level of debt. As a math teacher who had spent 3 decades navigating the financial realities of high school families, I had witnessed more than my fair share of households living precariously beyond their means. "We've arrived, ma'am," the driver, a young man with a discreet earpiece, announced. "That'll be $27. 50. I extracted 2 crisp $20 bills from my purse. "Keep the change," I stated, stepping out of the vehicle. "Could you assist me with my suitcase, please?" He nodded, retrieving my old, scuffed blue suitcase from the trunk. He set it gently on the sidewalk, gave another brief nod, and then the cab pulled away, leaving me standing alone before the imposing edifice of my son's home. I drew a deep, fortifying breath before advancing towards the front door. Alice's unexpected gift lay safely ensconced within my suitcase, $300,000 in neat bundles of $100 bills, discreetly wrapped in plain brown paper and tucked into a secret compartment Rex had meticulously crafted years ago for our grand European tour. "Just in case we run into trouble," he declared then, his eyes twinkling. "A solid backup plan never hurts." A backup plan. Indeed, I had one too. If my audacious gamble paid off, I intended to present Orson with $150,000, precisely half of the total. If, however, my hopes were dashed, well, there was a compelling reason. I had deliberately kept my golden years account active and my return bus ticket carefully stowed in the side pocket of my suitcase. The front door swung open just as I was about to press the doorbell. Orson stood framed in the doorway, impeccably dressed in a crisp blue shirt and dark trousers, the very embodiment of a successful middle manager. "Mom." He enveloped me in a hug, his enthusiasm seeming just a shade overdone. "You really should have called. I would have picked you up directly from the airport." "And deprive myself of the sheer delight of a surprise entrance?" I countered with a faint smile, gently disengaging from his embrace. "Besides, I'm keenly aware of how demanding your work schedule can be." "Never that demanding for my own mother," he insisted, hoisting my suitcase. "Good heavens, what in the world did you pack in here, Bricks?" I managed a laugh, striving for a note of naturalness. "You know how it is at my age, dear. Traveling light becomes an increasingly elusive concept. Medications, comfortable footwear, books, every single item seems to conspire against a light load." Orson led me into a cavernous hallway, its marble floor gleaming beneath a cascading crystal chandelier. The sheer opulence bordered on garishness. Gabrielle's undeniable influence, I deduced. My daughter-in-law had always possessed an unwavering predilection for overt displays of wealth over understated elegance. "Gabby." Orson's voice boomed, echoing slightly in the vast space. "Look who's here." Gabrielle materialized from the depths of the house, slender, impeccably tanned, her hair styled to absolute perfection, and clad in a dress that likely commanded a price equivalent to my entire monthly pension. 40 years old, yet effortlessly projecting the image of a woman in her mid-30s, a testament to rigorous dietary regimes, lavish aesthetic treatments, and, according to a recent hushed phone call with Orson, a few subtle adjustments, courtesy of a skilled plastic surgeon. "Brie." She glided towards me, leaving a delicate wave of floral perfume in her wake, and offered a hug so fleeting it barely registered, her body maintaining a polite distance. "What an utterly delightful surprise. Why ever didn't you inform us of your impending arrival? I would have ensured your room was absolutely immaculate." "My sincerest apologies, darling," I replied, matching her superficial embrace with one equally perfunctory. "The decision was entirely spontaneous. I trust one haven't caused any undue inconvenience." "Inconvenience? Why, my dear, What inconvenience could you possibly be referring to? Her smile, I noted, never quite reached her eyes. Your family. Family. A word that, under normal circumstances, should have evoked warmth and belonging, yet in Gabrielle's meticulously enunciated syllables, it resonated with the unsettling finality of a medical diagnosis. I'll escort you to your room, Orson interjected, already moving towards the grand staircase. We've placed you in the guest bedroom on the second floor. It boasts a charming view of the garden. I followed, carefully modulating my pace, striving not to reveal the increasing difficulty with which my arthritic knees navigated the ascent. The guest bedroom, predictably, was a capacious chamber dominated by an enormous bed, its stark white walls unadorned by a single personal artifact, not even a solitary photograph. It was the quintessential space for a transient guest, someone whose stay was clearly not intended to be prolonged. Make yourself comfortable, Orson stated, placing my suitcase beside the bed. Dinner will be served in approximately an hour. Gabby, bless her heart, ordered from that new Italian restaurant. You know she's not exactly a culinary enthusiast. Thank you, darling, I said, pressing a light kiss to his cheek. Allow me a brief interlude to refresh myself, and I'll be downstairs shortly. As the door clicked shut behind him, I finally permitted myself a sigh of profound relief. I sank onto the edge of the vast bed, feeling the accumulated tension of the past few days begin to dissipate. A pervasive doubt gnawed at me. Had I acted impulsively by arriving unannounced? Would it not have been wiser to make a prior phone call to subtly gauge the waters? Yet, my innate intuition, the very same instinct that had so often pinpointed instances of plagiarism in my students' test papers, whispered that the element of surprise would afford me a distinct advantage. I would be privy to their unvarnished, authentic reactions, untainted by days of carefully constructed pretenses. I approached the window. The vista was undeniably magnificent, a meticulously manicured garden, complete with an elegant gazebo, a diminutive fountain, and winding stone pathways. It appeared to have been lifted directly from the glossy pages of a country living magazine, and no doubt, had cost an absolute fortune. After a quick shower and changing into the navy blue dress Rex had affectionately dubbed my battle dress, I descended for dinner. The dining room mirrored the rest of the house, an enormous table crafted from dark, lustrous wood, sparkling crystal goblets, an array of polished silverware. Only 3 place settings adorned one end of the table, as if the remaining vast expanse were perpetually reserved for phantom guests who would never arrive. Gabrielle bustled about, orchestrating the arrangement of various containers of takeout food. I do hope you appreciate Italian cuisine, Brie, she remarked without bothering to meet my gaze. I took the liberty of ordering a diverse selection of dishes for your choosing. Everything appears absolutely delicious, I replied politely, though the majority of the dishes were utterly unfamiliar to my palate. Golden years, after all, favored a more traditional American culinary approach. You are truly too kind, Gabrielle. She finally lifted her gaze, offering a smile that, for once, felt almost genuine. You're most welcome. We so rarely have the pleasure of your company. A subtle note of relief, which I pointedly ignored, threaded through her voice. Orson appeared, uncorking a bottle of wine. Red or white, Mom? Red, please, I replied, but just a modest serving. At my age, alcohol and I are no longer the best of friends. A few sips of a good vintage are beneficial for the heart, he declared, filling my glass with a flourish. At least, that's what Dad always maintained. Your father had a penchant for many pronouncements. I smiled at the bittersweet memory, not all of which were rigorously scientifically validated. We settled into our seats, and the ritual of a strained family dinner commenced. The polite passing of dishes, innocuous comments about the weather, carefully phrased inquiries about my health. The conversation meticulously skirted any potentially fraught topics, adhering strictly to the safest, most well-worn paths. How are things at Golden Years? Orson inquired, spearing a piece of pasta. You've been rather reticent about your life there lately. It remains much the same, I replied evenly. As you know, little alters within the confines of assisted living facilities. The same faces, the same activities, the same predictable dinner conversations. It sounds rather cozy, Gabrielle interjected, her fork barely disturbing the food on her plate. She seemed to eat next to nothing, merely rearranging the portions. That's certainly one way to characterize monotony. I took a measured sip of my wine. However, I have managed to cultivate some engaging pursuits. I currently oversee a literature club for several of the residents. I partake in bridge games every Tuesday, and quite recently, I've embarked upon teaching Paul, our amiable receptionist, the intricacies of chess. That's truly wonderful, Mom. Orson's expression conveyed genuine pleasure. I always knew you possessed an innate ability to keep yourself occupied. As if I were presented with a viable alternative, the words escaped my lips with a sharper edge than intended. An awkward silence descended upon the table. What I meant, I hastened to clarify, is that at my age, one must relentlessly exercise the mind. Otherwise, one risks the ignominy of forgetting names and perpetually misplacing keys. Gabrielle's laughter erupted, a sound too loud, too overtly relieved. Oh, Bree, you always were so exceptionally practical. Orson often remarks that he inherited his remarkable organizational skills from you. Did he now? I fixed my gaze upon my son. I confess I never would have guessed. As a child, I frequently had to remind him to don clean undergarments. Mom, Orson's cheeks flushed a boyish crimson. I'm quite certain Gabby has no need for such granular details. On the contrary, Gabrielle interjected with a sudden, almost predatory interest. I adore anecdotes about little Orson. He divulges so precious little about his formative years. Emboldened, I launched into a series of humorous tales about my son's childhood, his earnest attempts to instruct the neighbor's cat in the art of bathtub swimming. The memorable day he inadvertently arrived at school in pajama bottoms concealed beneath his trousers on a particularly frigid morning, his stubborn refusal to consume green vegetables until the tender age of 12. Orson, though visibly mortified, clearly relished the spotlight of my attention. Gabrielle, for her part, laughed with unexpected genuine merriment, peppering me with eager questions. For a precious interlude, the atmosphere at the table softened, as if a thick layer of ice had begun to melt. Following dinner, Orson adamantly insisted that I retire for a rest while he and Gabrielle attended to clearing the table. You are our esteemed guest, Mom, he declared. Please, retreat to the living room and indulge in some television or a good book. We shall join you shortly. I offered no protest. It had been an arduous evening, and my aging knees were clamoring for respite. The living room, like every other meticulously appointed space in the house, bore the unmistakable hallmark of exorbitant expense: supple leather sofas, a gleaming glass coffee table, an enormous flat-screen television dominating one wall. Upon the mantelpiece, silver-framed photographs stood sentinel, Orson and Gabrielle vacationing in exotic locales, attending glitzy charity galas, posing against snowy backdrops at a ski resort. Not a single image of myself or of Rex. I sank into the plush depths of the sofa, idly picking up a glossy interior design magazine from the coffee table. As I languidly flipped through its pages, muffled voices drifted from the kitchen. Initially, I made a conscious effort to disregard them. Eavesdropping had never been a habit I cultivated. However, as Gabrielle's voice escalated, growing sharper and more strident, I found myself involuntarily straining to listen. Couldn't you have had the foresight to warn me? She demanded, her tone laced with exasperation. I had a critical meeting scheduled with Megan for tomorrow. Now I'm compelled to cancel. She's my mother, Gabby. Orson's voice sounded weary, suggesting this was a well-worn argument. What exactly was I supposed to do? Instruct her to depart? Of course not. Gabrielle's voice assumed a honeyed, deceptively sweet timbre, a deceptive cadence I had long since learned to recognize as a precursor to manipulation. But she could have called. We could have prepared. You are acutely aware of the paramount importance of this particular meeting to me. I know, sweetheart. Orson's voice was now tinged with a distinct note of guilt. But it's merely for a few days. She never extends her stays. A few days during which we are forced to maintain the pretense of a blissfully content family. Gabrielle lowered her voice further, and I strained my ears to catch the fragmented syllables. Did you observe the way she surveyed the house, meticulously scrutinizing every detail as if it were some academic examination? She's always been that way, Orson offered a half-hearted defense. It doesn't necessarily imply she's judgmental. But she is, Gabrielle insisted, her voice hardening. And I am utterly exhausted by this pervasive feeling of inadequacy within my own home. Besides, her voice dropped to an almost inaudible whisper, and I caught only a chilling fragment. The bank called. I leaned back against the cushions of the sofa, feigning complete absorption in the glossy pages of the magazine. As they entered the living room, Gabrielle carried a tray laden with coffee and an exquisite dessert, individual servings of tiramisu presented in elegant glass coupes. I sincerely hope you appreciate tiramisu, Brie, she offered with a dazzling smile that eradicated all trace of her recent irritation. It's the restaurant's signature specialty. It looks divine, I replied, though I had to admit I had never before tasted it. Oh, well then, you're in for an absolute culinary revelation. She set the tray down on the coffee table. Orson, darling, would you be so kind as to pour the coffee? The remainder of the evening unfolded in a similar vein of ostentatious attentiveness, superficial exchanges, and meticulously avoided subjects. I recounted mundane details about the nursing home, carefully omitting the profound loneliness that often gnawed at me. Orson divulged news of a recent promotion at work, conveniently neglecting to mention that the said promotion had actually occurred over a year ago. Gabrielle expounded upon her charitable committee activities, carefully neglecting to specify that her involvement typically extended no further than purchasing tickets to high-profile events and showcasing her latest designer ensembles. Around 10 o'clock, feigning an acute onset of fatigue, I made my way towards my room. As I ascended the stairs, I distinctly heard Gabrielle's cell phone ring, followed by the hurried patter of her footsteps heading towards the study. Once within the confines of the guest bedroom, my immediate impulse was to check my suitcase. The money remained precisely where I had concealed it, untouched. It wasn't that I harbored any concrete suspicion of Orson or Gabrielle resorting to outright theft, but the ingrained habit of verifying the security of valuables, a ritual born from years of frequent travel, had become second nature. I showered, changed into my nightgown, and was on the verge of slipping into bed when Gabrielle's muffled voice, distinct despite the intervening wall, drifted from the adjacent room. She was on the phone, her words sufficiently audible to penetrate the thin barrier. This is the third call this week. I explicitly informed them we would settle the payment next month, but they simply refused to listen. A tense pause. No, absolutely do not inform Orson. He's already teetering on the edge. Yes, they did promise a raise, but it's not slated until next quarter. I know, I swear I'll repay you by month's end. No, borrowing is not a viable option. We already carry 3 outstanding loans. I recoiled from the wall, a wave of guilt washing over me for my involuntary eavesdropping. Yet, the damning information had already taken root in my mind: financial ruin. Not merely ephemeral difficulties, but profound, critical indebtedness, if her conversation was any indication. And Gabrielle, it was clear, was actively concealing a significant portion of this dire truth from Orson. I retreated to bed, but sleep remained an elusive phantom. My thoughts whirled ceaselessly around the overheard conversation, the ostentatious house they so clearly could not afford, and the substantial sum of money nestled within my suitcase. Funds that possessed the power to resolve their escalating predicament. Funds they remained blissfully unaware of. My initial intention had been to reveal the inheritance to them tomorrow over breakfast. Now I wavered. My intuition, the same unerring sixth sense that had unfailingly guided me in detecting instances of academic dishonesty in my students' test papers, strongly suggested I should prolong my observation, gather further intelligence about their true circumstances before laying bare my cards. Outside the window, the ceaseless night rain provided a rhythmic soundtrack, and I focused on its monotonous drumming, striving to drown out the clamor of my increasingly troubled thoughts. A distant door slammed somewhere within the house, followed by the indistinct murmur of voices. Orson and Gabrielle were unequivocally embroiled in an argument, though their words remained frustratingly unintelligible. I turned onto my other side, pulling the blanket up to my chin. Tomorrow. Tomorrow I would watch with renewed vigilance, listen with heightened acuity, and perhaps, by the close of the day, I would finally comprehend the full scope of the rot festering beneath the immaculate facade of their perfect family unit. The morning commenced with flavored coffee and a conspicuously awkward breakfast. Gabrielle, ever the paragon of superficial grace, lavished me with homemade waffles, fresh berries, and creamy yogurt. She even inquired about my daily plans with an almost theatrical enthusiasm, as if my response held genuine significance for her. Yet, I had long since mastered the nuances of my daughter-in-law's mercurial temperament, her swift oscillations from barely concealed irritation to saccharine concern, and back again. "I have a client meeting," she announced, delicately dabbing her lips with a linen napkin. "Is it quite all right if I leave you two to your own devices? Orson is working from home today." "Of course, dear," I smiled. "My son and I shall undoubtedly enjoy a most delightful time." Orson looked up from his tablet. "I could potentially reschedule a couple of appointments to offer you a tour of the city, Mom. So much has evolved since your last visit." "No need, darling," I patted his arm gently. "I'm acutely aware of your demanding schedule. Besides, I could certainly benefit from a day of restorative rest after yesterday's rather arduous journey." Gabrielle vanished around 9, leaving behind a lingering trail of expensive perfume and vague assurances of returning not too late. Orson retreated to the sanctum of his home office, leaving me alone with the cavernous house and my increasingly disquieted thoughts. I spent the morning aimlessly wandering through the ground floor rooms, meticulously scrutinizing the family photographs adorning the walls, the spines of books lining the shelves, the myriad small details that, I've always believed, reveal more about an individual's true essence than any direct utterance. I observed that the books were predominantly gift editions, many with spines entirely uncreased, suggesting they remained unread. Orson's meticulously curated music collection from his youth was conspicuously absent. In its place, a sterile, state-of-the-art sound system churned out generic popular music playlists. At noon, Orson descended for a sandwich, his face etched with exhaustion from his morning calls. "Apologies, Mom. Work has been utter madness recently," he explained, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "New project, escalating deadlines." "It's quite all right, honey," I offered, helping him prepare his lunch. "I hardly expect you to entertain me every waking moment." We ate in the kitchen, Orson regaling me with a hurried, slightly nervous monologue about his recent promotion, his expanded responsibilities, and the company's ambitious plans. He spoke quickly, almost frantically, studiously avoiding any conversational lulls. I listened, nodded, interjected with appropriately vague questions, but I couldn't shake the insidious sensation that he was deliberately steering the conversation away from the very financial predicament I had overheard the previous evening. "Gabby is truly exerting herself," he declared abruptly, as if responding to an unspoken accusation. "Her business is merely in its nascent stages, but she harbors grand designs." "Business?" I managed to keep my voice meticulously neutral. "You never mentioned Gabrielle had embarked upon her own venture." "Interior design." Orson offered a strained smile. "She's always possessed impeccable taste, you know. And now she's made the commendable decision to transform it into a professional pursuit." "That is indeed commendable," I acknowledged, taking a sip of my tea. "How long has she been engaged in this endeavor?" "Approximately a year." He began gathering the dishes, a clear signal that the topic was now closed. "Not a multitude of clients yet, but you comprehend the nature of launching a new enterprise. It requires time. And, investment. Investment." Perhaps a significant portion of their financial woes stemmed from Gabrielle's ambitious, but likely underfunded business launch. I made a mental note. "Of course, dear," I assisted him in loading the dishwasher. "Incidentally, I had intended to visit the bank tomorrow. Do you happen to know the location of the nearest branch?" "A bank?" He frowned, a flicker of suspicion in his eyes. "Why do you wish to go to the bank, Mom?" "Oh, merely to verify a minor detail concerning my account." I waved a dismissive hand. "Nothing remotely urgent." Orson's shoulders visibly relaxed. "There are several branches downtown. I could drive you if you wish. No need whatsoever, I smiled. I am perfectly capable of summoning a cab. I would hate to divert you from your important work. He nodded with palpable relief, retreating back to his office, and I resumed my quiet exploration of the house. On the second floor, I discovered Gabrielle's office, a meticulously designed space furnished with a massive designer desk, an array of fabric swatches, and glossy furniture catalogs. Design magazines lay scattered everywhere, many with dog-eared pages marking coveted designs. Upon the desk, a precarious stack of invoices lay nestled within open envelopes. I knew intellectually that I shouldn't pry, but an overpowering surge of curiosity and mounting anxiety propelled me forward. The bills themselves narrated a grim tale: critically late credit card payments bearing astronomical interest rates, a dire notice regarding a past-due mortgage installment, a landscaper's bill so exorbitant it could sustain my nursing home expenses for months. Within a desk drawer, I unearthed a cache of loan agreements and chilling letters from collection agencies. The true gravity of their situation was far more dire than I had dared to imagine. I meticulously returned every document to its precise original position, then quietly exited the room, feeling like an unwelcome spy in my own son's supposed sanctuary. Yet, the information I had gleaned served only to confirm my darkest suspicions. They were living far beyond their means, and their financial precipice was imminent. Towards evening, Gabrielle returned, her arms laden with shopping bags from prohibitively expensive boutiques. Her cheeks were flushed with an almost feverish excitement, her eyes glistening. "A sale," she exclaimed, catching my gaze. It was utterly impossible to resist. At dinner, she regaled us with an impassioned account of a meeting with a prospective client, the owner of a sprawling country estate who desired a complete interior overhaul. "If I secure this commission, it will be an absolute breakthrough." She squeezed Orson's hand, her voice brimming with fervent hope. "Precisely what we so desperately require." "That's truly wonderful, sweetheart," he responded, attempting a smile, but I noted the subtle tension etched around the corners of his eyes. I observed their intricate dynamic, striving to decipher the unspoken complexities of their relationship. Gabrielle, intensely focused, controlling, perpetually demanding attention. Orson, perpetually yielding, assuaging, unwavering in his support. They moved through their interactions like meticulously rehearsed actors in a well-staged play, each acutely aware of their assigned role. Yet, beneath the flawless facade, nascent fissures were becoming increasingly apparent. After dinner, I again invoked the excuse of fatigue and ascended to my room. My intention was to read, but I realized I had left my reading glasses downstairs in the living room. Tiptoeing down the grand staircase, taking extreme care not to disturb Orson and Gabrielle, I discerned their hushed voices emanating from the study. The door remained ajar, casting a narrow sliver of light onto the hallway carpet. "We cannot procrastinate any further." Gabrielle's voice, now devoid of honeyed sweetness, sounded insistent, almost desperate. "The bank has issued its definitive warning. One more missed payment, and they will initiate foreclosure proceedings." I know, Orson's voice was barely a whisper, infused with profound weariness. "I'm making every effort, Gabby." I approached my boss regarding the bonus, but he reiterated it won't materialize until next quarter. "Next quarter?" Her voice rose an octave, sharp with incredulity. "Are you utterly serious? We are precisely 3 weeks from the mortgage deadline, not to mention the escalating credit card balances and your car loan." A heavy silence descended, broken only by the distinct sound of a bottle being uncorked, followed by the soft clinking of glass against glass. They were pouring themselves a drink. "We absolutely must consider other avenues," Gabrielle stated, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "More immediate sources of income." "What exactly do you imply?" Orson's tone was wary, tinged with a nascent apprehension. "Your mother." Gabrielle uttered the words so softly that I literally held my breath to catch them. "She's concealing something." "I am certain of it." This abrupt visit, her probing questions about the bank, Mom. Orson let out a short, unnatural laugh, devoid of genuine amusement. "She merely has a penchant, Gabby." What on earth could she possibly be concealing? I remain uncertain, Gabrielle conceded, but something about this situation feels profoundly amiss. Have you not noticed her unwavering attachment to that suitcase? She never relinquishes it, never even fully unpacks it. I even ventured into her room while you were at lunch and attempted to look inside, but it was locked. My breath caught in my throat. She had dared to rifle through my belongings. A wave of profound relief washed over me that I had possessed the foresight to lock the suitcase. You dared to go through my mother's possessions? Orson's voice was laced with genuine shock. Gabby, that is completely out of line. Do not lecture me, she snapped, her patience clearly frayed. We are in dire need of funds, not sanctimonious moralizing. If your mother possesses any hidden savings, we have a right to be apprised of it. And what exactly do you propose? Orson asked after a protracted pause, his voice sounding oddly submissive, as if he already anticipated her chilling response and lacked the will to resist. Engage her in conversation, Gabrielle articulated more gently now, her voice a seductive purr. Confide in her about our current predicaments. She is your mother. She will undoubtedly wish to assist. If she possesses savings, she might be persuaded to lend us a portion. And if she doesn't, well, at the very least, we will have a definitive answer. I simply cannot bring myself to ask her for money directly, Orson protested, his voice tinged with humiliation. It would be utterly degrading. More degrading than losing your home. Gabrielle's voice sharpened, cutting him off. Is it more degrading than declaring bankruptcy? The choice, Orson, is unequivocally yours, your fragile pride, or our entire future. Silence once again descended, broken only by Orson's profoundly heavy sigh. All right, he finally conceded, his voice barely audible. I will speak with her tomorrow. I will ascertain the extent of her assets and attempt to persuade her to aid us. Excellent. Gabrielle's voice was laced with undisguised satisfaction. And do not neglect to casually mention that we are, of course, always prepared to take her in, should the financial burden of maintaining a nursing home prove too onerous. That will subtly lay the groundwork for a subsequent, more pointed conversation. And if she refuses? Orson inquired, a threat of desperation in his tone. What then? Then, Gabrielle's voice hardened, taking on a dangerous, calculating edge, we shall be compelled to consider other alternatives. Perhaps she should be persuaded to reevaluate her will. After all, you are her sole offspring. To whom else would she bequeath her accumulated wealth? You speak of my mother as if she were merely a bag of money. Orson's voice trembled, raw with a nascent outrage. It's fundamentally wrong. What is fundamentally wrong? Gabrielle cut him off, her voice a cold, sharp blade, is that we stand on the precipice of financial catastrophe, and your mother sits idly upon funds that could literally rescue us. It is time, Orson, to cease being a mama's boy and to commence thinking about our future. I slowly, carefully, began to crawl away from the wall, a wave of profound nausea washing over me. My son, my Orson. The very same boy I had single-handedly raised after his father's untimely death, to whom I had read countless bedtime stories, whose scraped knees I had gently kissed, whom I had painstakingly taught the paramount values of honesty and compassion. This man, my son, was now cold-bloodedly conspiring to extort money from me, intending to then consign me to live out my remaining days in a faceless, state-run institution with the most minimal of care. And Gabrielle, her chilling pronouncements about my remaining lifespan, her ruthless, calculating disposition, her chilling willingness to manipulate and outright lie, it was more terrifying than I could possibly have imagined. This woman did not perceive me as a human being. I was merely an impediment, an obstacle to be brutally overcome on her relentless pursuit of my money. It required several minutes for the violent trembling in my hands to subside. My initial, primal instinct was to burst into their study, to scream, to unleash a torrent of furious accusations. But what concrete good would that accomplish? Orson would undoubtedly offer contrite apologies. Gabrielle would feign shock and indignation. They would, with practiced ease, assure me I had grievously misunderstood, and then, armed with the knowledge of my awareness, they would become infinitely more circumspect in their pronouncements. And I, in turn, would lose my critical advantage. No, I must approach this differently. I must safeguard myself, and I must protect my money, Alice's precious inheritance, which was intended to grant me freedom, not to service Gabrielle's crippling debts and her insatiable, profligate spending sprees. I had to escape this house, and I had to do so before their malevolent plan could fully coalesce. I quietly slipped from the bed and made my way to my suitcase. I unzipped it, verifying the contents of the secret compartment. The money remained there, $300,000 packed in meticulously neat bundles. I closed the suitcase, then paused, wrestling with a critical decision. Should I attempt to depart immediately, under the cloak of night, or wait until dawn, when I could more discreetly summon a taxi? The answer materialized with chilling clarity. In the morning, they would inevitably initiate their manipulative scheme, and I would find myself ensnared in an endless labyrinth of forced conversations, insidious manipulations, perhaps even outright demands. No, it was unequivocally better to depart now, shrouded by the protective anonymity of night. I quietly gathered my remaining belongings, meticulously packing every item into my suitcase. I dressed in comfortable clothing, suitable for travel, retrieved my purse containing my essential documents and phone. For a fleeting moment, I contemplated leaving a farewell note, but quickly discarded the notion it would only furnish them with a critical advantage. They would know I had overheard everything, allowing them to meticulously craft their subsequent explanations and counter-narratives. Carefully, taking excruciating pains to avoid any telltale creaks from the old floorboards, I left the room. The house lay submerged in an unsettling silence, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, counting down the seconds. I descended the stairs with agonizing slowness, each step a profound effort, not merely due to the insistent ache in my arthritic knees, but due to the crushing weight in my heart. This house, these people, my son and his wife, they were my family. Or, more accurately, they should have been. I understood now that it was all merely an illusion, a fragile house of cards that had irrevocably crumbled at the first, stinging breath of truth. Once in the grand lobby, I silently retrieved my phone and, utilizing an app, summoned a taxi. Arriving in 15 minutes, the screen announced with dispassionate efficiency. I meticulously deactivated the alarm system. Orson, predictably, had utilized the same simple code as our old house, his birth date, and then quietly stepped out onto the porch, gently closing the massive door behind me. The night air was crisp and cool, a welcome antidote to the oppressive atmosphere within. I stood for a moment in the deep shade of a towering oak, gripping the handle of my suitcase so tightly my knuckles blanched, and gazed up at the dark, unlit windows of the second story. There, beyond those darkened panes, my son and his wife were, at this very moment, undoubtedly plotting how to strip me of the last vestiges of a decent, comfortable life. The raw pain of that realization was almost physical, a searing ache in my chest. In the distance, the faint headlights of an approaching taxi materialized. It was time. Time to depart, to flee this profound betrayal I had never, in my wildest imaginings, expected to experience from my own flesh and blood. With a heart heavy with sorrow, yet imbued with an unyielding resolve, I stepped towards the road, ready to embark upon an entirely new chapter of my life, a chapter in which I would, incredibly, be forced to defend myself against the very individuals who were meant to be my protectors. The taxi glided silently through the deserted streets of the slumbering city. I gazed out the window at the dark, unlit houses flickering past like specters and felt an unsettling sensation, as if I were observing a life that now existed in a parallel reality, utterly inaccessible, profoundly alien. The driver, a young man with a smoothly shaven head and an ever-present earpiece, made no attempt at conversation, for which I was deeply grateful. I desperately needed this quiet interlude to process the catastrophic events of the night. "To the bus station, correct?" he inquired, his voice breaking the silence as we exited Orson's affluent neighborhood. "Yes, please." My voice was quiet but firm, imbued with a newfound resolve. I gripped the handle of my suitcase even tighter, as if someone might, at any moment, snatch it from me right out of the moving car. $300,000. Money that could have utterly transformed my life for the better, that I had intended to generously share with my son. Now, it had become the very catalyst for my frantic flight, metamorphosing from a benevolent gift into a coveted prize, relentlessly pursued by the very people who were meant to be closest to me. Memory, with cruel efficiency, obligingly dredged up fragments of the overheard conversation. How long does she have left? 5 years? 10 if she's lucky. This will subtly lay the groundwork for a subsequent, more pointed conversation. This money will do far more good for us than for her. Gabrielle's venomous words stung like a swarm of wasps, leaving festering, painful welts upon my mind. But what inflicted the deepest, most excruciating wound was Orson's craven acquiescence. My son. My boy. The one who had once regarded me with eyes brimming with adoration and unshakable trust. How had we arrived at this desolate juncture? At what precise moment had I ceased to be his mother and evolved into a mere source of potential income? The taxi turned onto the wide, arterial road leading to the bus station. The nocturnal city appeared ghostly, almost surreal, like a meticulously constructed set in a shadow theater. Sparse streetlights cast isolated pools of yellowish light onto the empty sidewalks. The neon signs of convenience stores flickered with an unsettling, restless glow. "Rough night?" the driver inquired suddenly, catching my gaze in the rearview mirror. "You could certainly say that," I replied, attempting a weak smile that never quite reached my lips. "You know," he continued, slowing the vehicle at an intersection, "my grandmother always used to say, the night is always darkest just before the dawn. It's an old adage, but there's a certain undeniable truth to it, isn't there?" "Your grandmother," I said, feeling a sudden lump in my throat. "She sounds like a very wise woman." "I profoundly hope she's right." He nodded, then redirected his focus to the road, leaving me once more to the company of my bitter thoughts. Those thoughts were a corrosive brew. I reflected on the immense sacrifices I had made, raising Orson alone after Rex's premature demise. The boy had been a mere 15 years old when his father passed, a profoundly difficult age, particularly for a young man who had just lost the primary male figure in his life. I had worked 2 demanding jobs relentlessly to ensure he had a decent upbringing, that he could gain admittance to a reputable college. I had denied myself every indulgence, from new clothing to vacations we hadn't been able to afford in years. I vividly recalled the harrowing period when he contracted pneumonia during his senior year of high school. For 3 sleepless days, I had not once left his bedside, tirelessly applying cold compresses to his fever-ravaged forehead, meticulously counting every labored breath, offering fervent prayers to every deity I didn't even believe in. When the crisis finally abated and the doctor, his face etched with relief, declared the worst was over, I had locked myself in the bathroom and sobbed, not from sorrow, but from a profound, guttural relief, choking back tears of overwhelming gratitude. And now this very boy, this man he had become, was prepared to consign me to a faceless, state-run nursing home, all to hoard a paltry few $1,000s a month. The sheer acrid bitterness of this betrayal was so sharp, so unexpected, that it literally stole my breath away. "Here we are," the driver's voice jolted me from my dark reverie. The bus station at this late hour was virtually deserted. A few solitary figures slumped in uneasy slumber on the hard plastic seats of the waiting room. A lone janitor methodically pushed a wide mop across the concrete floor, slowly erasing the day's grimy traces. I paid the driver, leaving a more than generous tip, and made my way towards the ticket office. The night cashier, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and dyed red hair, was languidly flipping through a glossy magazine. "What can I do for you?" she asked, stifling a yawn that barely escaped her lips. "I require a ticket to South Bethany on the next available departure," I stated, extracting my wallet. She tapped rhythmically on her computer keyboard. "There's a bus scheduled for 4:30 in the morning, arriving in South Bethany around 8. Would that suffice?" "Yes, that will be perfectly acceptable," I confirmed, handing her my credit card. "1 ticket, please." With the ticket securely in hand, I located an unoccupied seat in the waiting room, deliberately choosing one far removed from the few other passengers. It was still over an hour until departure. I positioned my suitcase between my legs, my grip firm on the handle, and pulled out my phone. 3 missed calls from Orson. So, he had already detected my absence. I promptly switched the phone off. The explanation, whatever form it might take, could wait. As I sat in the half-empty waiting room, a sudden, crushing wave of profound age and utter solitude washed over me. All my life, I had believed I was meticulously constructing a stable foundation for the future, both my own and that of my son. I had toiled, diligently saved, meticulously planned. And this, I thought with a grim twist of my lips, was the culmination. At 75, I sat in a desolate bus station in the dead of night, having fled my own child's home with a suitcase brimming with cash. Humorous, perhaps, if one possessed a truly dark sense of irony. Or utterly tragic. The delicate line separating comedy from tragedy, I mused, had always been precariously thin. Waves of exhaustion washed over me, yet I was terrified to close my eyes. What if I succumbed to sleep and someone brazenly stole my suitcase? What if Orson, with some uncanny intuition, divined my destination and appeared here before the bus departed? Paranoia, my mind whispered, a chilling little voice. But my raw instinct for self-preservation, honed by years of quiet struggle, was undeniably stronger. At precisely 4 o'clock, the disembodied voice over the loudspeaker announced boarding for my route. I struggled to rise, my knees aching with a dull throb after so many hours perched on the unyielding plastic seat. The bus itself was largely empty. A few young students, headphones firmly in place, lost in their digital worlds, an elderly couple, huddled together in the middle of the cabin, a lone man in a worn jacket, snoring softly by a window. I selected a seat at the very back of the bus, placed my suitcase on the adjacent seat, and draped my jacket over it, a flimsy attempt at concealment. As the bus lurched forward, I felt a peculiar sense of liberation, as if with each passing kilometer separating me from Orson's house, an invisible, crushing weight was steadily lifting from my shoulders. I stared out the window at the dark, retreating silhouettes of buildings, my thoughts drifting back to the gradual, unsettling transformation of my relationship with my son over the years. When he had first introduced me to Gabrielle, I had genuinely rejoiced for him. She was energetic, ambitious, and seemed, on the surface, a suitable match for my often too gentle, sometimes overly compliant Orson. I harbored a fervent hope that she would inspire him to strive for more, to fully realize the dormant potential I had always discerned within him. But imperceptibly, inexorably, I began to notice a chilling shift. Orson's calls grew less frequent, his visits shorter and imbued with a palpable formality. When I dared to inquire about the specifics of his life, he would respond in vague generalities, meticulously avoiding any true detail. One memorable day, when I called unannounced, Gabrielle answered the phone, brusquely informing me that Orson was unavailable, citing an overwhelmingly busy schedule. Yet, I distinctly heard his voice in the background, followed by a laugh that abruptly cut off when Gabrielle, covering the receiver with her hand, spoke sharply to him. Gradually, the insidious realization took root. I was becoming an outsider in my own son's life. I received obligatory invitations to Thanksgiving and Christmas, the non-negotiable family holidays that, I knew, could not be bypassed without social stigma. Yet, even during these gatherings, I felt like a mere guest, an invited observer, rather than an integral member of the family. When I finally made the difficult decision to sell the house and relocate to Golden Years, Orson offered no discernible objection. He did, of course, offer for me to move in with them, but his voice lacked any genuine enthusiasm, and Gabrielle made no attempt to disguise her palpable relief when I politely declined. "You'll undoubtedly be happier among your peers," she had declared then. Now, with the stark clarity of hindsight, I finally comprehended the true, chilling meaning of her words. "You'll be far away from us, and far away from our money." The bus pulled into a small station, signaling a brief respite. I remained in my seat, unwilling to risk leaving my suitcase unattended. Instead, I retrieved a bottle of water from my bag and took a few fortifying sips. The phone in my pocket vibrated insistently. Orson again. I deliberately ignored the call. What words, I pondered, could I possibly utter to him when we finally spoke? Would I reveal that I had eavesdropped on his insidious conversation with his wife? That I was privy to their cruel plans to relegate me to a state-run nursing home? That I now knew their chilling calculation of how much time I had left, a mere 5 or perhaps 10 fortunate years? The inadequacy of language, I realized with a fresh wave of pain, rendered any attempt to convey the sheer depth of my anguish and frustration utterly futile. As the bus resumed its journey, the eastern sky began its slow, reluctant awakening. Dawn crept in, hesitant, as if the sun itself harbored reservations about rising on this particular, somber day. I watched the encroaching darkness recede, giving way to a pale, indistinct light, and pondered what awaited me. In South Bethany, the Golden Years Assisted Living Facility loomed, a place that had never truly felt like a home, yet now seemed, paradoxically, like my only viable sanctuary. Except, I couldn't return there immediately. Orson, I knew, would undoubtedly direct his initial search efforts there. I desperately needed a temporary haven, a quiet space to gather my scattered thoughts and meticulously strategize my next move. And then a name surfaced from the depths of my memory: Lynette. My cherished old friend from college. Lynette resided in a small, unassuming house on the tranquil outskirts of South Bethany. Widowed 5 years prior, she led a quiet, contemplative life, occasionally gracing me with her presence at Golden Years, bearing offerings of homemade baked goods and the freshest, most delectable gossip. Lynette had always extended an open invitation to her home. "If you ever tire of that gilded cage, Brie, you must come visit me," she had often joked, her words referring to the Golden Years facility. I possess a spare bedroom and, most importantly, no rigid medication schedule. I extracted my phone from my pocket and switched it on, pointedly ignoring the burgeoning list of missed call notifications from Orson. I located Lynette's number and dialed, my fingers trembling slightly. Message: "I'll be in South Bethany by 8 o'clock this morning. I am in desperate need of your assistance. I will explain everything upon our meeting. Can you possibly meet me at the bus station?" The reply arrived almost instantaneously. "Despite the ungodly hour, I will." "Is everything all right?" "Not really," I typed back, my thumbs clumsy. "I'll tell you when I meet you." Waiting. Don't worry, Lynette's message appeared moments later, and a profound surge of gratitude washed over me, a warm current of emotion towards this woman who, unlike my own flesh and blood, had never once turned her back on me. I dozed fitfully for the remainder of the journey, roused by every subtle twist and sudden braking of the bus. I dreamed of Orson, but he was a small boy again, with scraped knees and eyes filled with boundless trust, asking me why I was leaving him. "I'm not leaving," I told him in the dream, my voice an aching whisper. "You're the one who left me." He stared back, incomprehension clouding his innocent face, and then, his features subtly shifted, matured, sharpened, his eyes darkening until, confronting me, was the face of a stranger, wearing the chilling guise of my son. I awoke with a pounding heart as the bus finally pulled into South Bethany. The gentle morning light bathed the familiar streets, imbuing them with an almost postcard-like serenity. A small town, slowly stirring to life for a new day. Ordinary people hurried to work, storefronts were being unlocked, and the world, oblivious to my personal cataclysm, continued its inexorable spin. The South Bethany bus station was a modest, red-brick edifice, housing a small cafe and a newsstand within its unassuming walls. I spotted Lynette the moment I disembarked. She stood at the entrance, tall and erect, her mop of silver-gray hair gathered into a casual, elegant bun. She wore a simple linen dress beneath a light cardigan, despite the crisp morning chill. "Brie?" She waved, then quickly strode forward, her movements surprisingly agile, to assist me with my suitcase. "Oh my goodness, you look utterly exhausted. What on earth has transpired?" It's a long story, I murmured, embracing her, inhaling the comforting, familiar scent of lavender soap and freshly baked goods. Thank you, truly, for coming. Don't be ridiculous, dear heart. She took my hand in hers, her grip firm and reassuring. My car is in the parking lot. Let's head to my place. I'll prepare a hot breakfast, and you can recount every single detail. As we walked towards her venerable old Volvo, I could feel the suffocating tension of the last few hours slowly, mercifully, beginning to recede. Lynette, with her characteristic tact, asked no probing questions. She was simply there, a solid, calm, familiar presence. Your son telephoned me approximately an hour ago, she stated abruptly as we reached the car. He inquired if I knew your whereabouts. He sounded concerned. I froze. What did you tell him? That I hadn't seen you since Tuesday, when I visited you at Golden Years, she replied, her gaze carefully scrutinizing my face. I did not lie, dear. But from your appearance and this sudden, early morning arrival with your suitcase, it's clear something profoundly serious has transpired. I nodded, the familiar lump once again rising in my throat. Very serious, Lynette. I'm not sure I can ever truly forgive him. She helped me into the passenger seat and carefully placed my suitcase in the trunk. Whatever may unfold, she declared as she started the engine, her voice firm with unwavering loyalty, you are welcome to reside with me for as long as you require. The spare bedroom is perpetually yours. Thank you. I looked out the window at the familiar streets of South Bethany, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I experienced a sensation akin to returning home from a long, arduous journey. I need time to process everything, to decide my next course of action. You shall have all the time in the world, Lynette assured me, driving the car with confident ease through the waking morning streets. In the interim, a hot breakfast, a revitalizing shower, and much-needed rest await you. The rest, my dear, will simply have to wait. I leaned back into the seat, feeling the immense fatigue of the past 24 hours settle upon me like a heavy, suffocating blanket. There was indeed a multitude of decisions to be made. What to do with the substantial sum of money, how to effectively shield myself from Orson and Gabrielle's inevitable attempts to seize it, how to simply exist with the raw, brutal realization of betrayal by the very individuals who should have been closest to me. But in this precious, fleeting moment, a strange, profound relief permeated my being. I was no longer a prisoner, trapped within the deceptive confines of a fictional happy family. I now perceived the truth, unvarnished, bitter, agonizing, but the truth nonetheless. And within that searing clarity, there lay an unexpected, liberating freedom. Lynette's quaint house appeared on the horizon, a small, inviting cottage adorned with a vibrant tapestry of spring flowers in its garden. A haven where peace and security awaited my battered spirit, a temporary refuge on my unexpected journey towards a new life, a life I was, against all odds, destined to construct anew at 75 years old. Here we are, Lynette announced, pulling the car into the neat, gravel driveway. Welcome to my humble abode. I looked at her, truly saw her, the gentle crinkles at the corners of her eyes, her inherently kind smile, the prominent veins tracing paths across her hands, so strikingly similar to my own. A surge of profound gratitude welled within me. You know, I said, my voice thick with emotion, sometimes, family isn't solely defined by the blood that courses through our veins, but by the extraordinary individuals who steadfastly refuse to abandon us in our darkest hour of need. Lynette squeezed my hand, her eyes glistening. Welcome home, Bree. Everything, I promise you, is going to be all right now. And for the first time in an immeasurable span, I truly, deeply believed her. Lynette's charming cottage became my sanctuary for the subsequent 2 weeks. Its unassuming yet incredibly cozy interior, complemented by a garden bursting with the vibrant hues of spring, proved to be precisely the haven I desperately required, a tranquil harbor far removed from the tempest I had so abruptly abandoned. Lynette, with her innate tact and profound understanding, refrained from any intrusive questioning, allowing me the crucial time and space to slowly, painstakingly, regain my equilibrium. It was not until the third day, over a comforting cup of afternoon tea, that I finally unburdened myself, meticulously recounting the entire saga, Alice's astonishing inheritance, my initial, naive plans to share the funds with Orson, the chilling overheard conversation, and the desperate, clandestine escape into the night. Selfish, conniving bastards. Lynette erupted when I had finally concluded my harrowing narrative, her usually placid features contorted by a surge of righteous anger. Especially that Gabrielle. I always harbored a suspicion that something was profoundly amiss with that woman. Orson is no better, a bitter accusation escaped my lips. He complicitly went along with her nefarious scheme. My very own son, Brie. Lynette gently covered my trembling hand with her own. Some individuals possess an uncanny ability to manipulate others with such insidious skill that their victims eventually lose all sense of their own volition. I offer no excuses for Orson's reprehensible actions, my dear, but perhaps the relentless years spent in that woman's insidious orbit simply broke him. I yearn to object, to vehemently assert that a man of his maturity should bear unreserved responsibility for his own choices, but the shrill ring of the telephone abruptly severed our conversation. Lynette glanced at the caller ID, her brow furrowing. "It's him again," she muttered, a weary resignation in her voice. Third time today. Orson, it turned out, had relentlessly telephoned Lynette every single day since my sudden disappearance. Occasionally, he would call my own phone, but I consistently refused to answer, merely perusing the increasingly desperate messages he left. "Mom, where in God's name are you? We are utterly consumed with worry. Please, for the love of God, call us. We can resolve anything. If I have somehow erred, let us discuss it." Not a single one of his messages contained even a nascent glimmer of admitted guilt, or any genuine comprehension of the profound betrayal that had transpired. The following day, two more of my steadfast friends joined our burgeoning council. Susan Meyer, a fellow resident from Golden Years, an irrepressibly eccentric former artist whose optimism remained undimmed by the passage of time, and Edie Britt, a woman whose biting sarcasm was matched only by her profound insight, a former high school colleague. Lynette, with her characteristic flair for organization, convened the gathering as a veritable women's council for older women, their bond forged by enduring friendship, united by a singular, overarching objective: to meticulously strategize my future. "You should absolutely sue him," Edie declared unequivocally when I finished recounting my tale, her eyes flashing with indignant fire. "For emotional distress, for moral damages, and for attempted financial exploitation." "Edie." Susan rolled her eyes heavenward with theatrical exasperation. "You perceive every transgression as a pretext for litigation. Bree does not require vengeance. She requires a meticulously crafted plan and, above all else, safety." Lynette added, her voice calm and authoritative. "Orson is expected in South Bethany tomorrow. He will undoubtedly search for Bree everywhere. Then we must act with utmost celerity." Susan interjected, her energy infectious. "I have an intimate acquaintance at Seaside Gardens, a brand new assisted living facility situated directly on the coast, far superior to Golden Years. It offers private suites with unparalleled medical care." Seaside Gardens. I vaguely recalled the magnificent, ocean-facing edifice that Lynette and I occasionally drove past, its grandeur a stark contrast to my current abode. "But it must cost a veritable fortune," I exclaimed. "You possess a fortune," Edie countered, nodding pointedly towards my suitcase. "It is high time you appropriated it for your own well-being, rather than leaving it to those ungrateful, manipulative crooks." We devoted the entire afternoon to an exhaustive discussion of myriad options, culminating in the meticulous formulation of a comprehensive plan. By evening, the pivotal decision was made. I would definitively relocate to Seaside Gardens, meticulously arranging for a full year's rent to be paid in advance, thereby erecting an impregnable financial barrier against any future machinations from Orson. A portion of the remaining funds would be securely deposited into a newly established bank account under my sole name, with a prudent emergency cash stash discreetly concealed within my new apartment. The following morning, Susan placed a call to her friend at Seaside Gardens, and by noon, I had secured an appointment with the facility's receptionist. Lynette and I proceeded directly there after lunch. Seaside Gardens, in every exquisite detail, perfectly mirrored my earlier mental envisioning. An elegant, three-story architectural masterpiece boasting panoramic windows that offered breathtaking vistas, surrounded by a meticulously manicured park that gently sloped towards the endless expanse of the ocean. Inside, we were greeted by Victoria Bowen, a receptionist whose impeccably coiffed hair and piercingly attentive eyes conveyed an air of consummate professionalism. We dedicated the next hour to a comprehensive tour of Seaside Gardens, capacious single suites, each boasting a private, spa-like bathroom, a gourmet restaurant presided over by a master chef, an inviting library, a sun-drenched winter garden, a sparkling swimming pool, and a state-of-the-art medical center staffed by a dedicated team of full-time professionals. Every amenity was undeniably impressive, promising a level of comfort and luxury I had scarcely dared to dream of during my years at Golden Years. Our paramount objective here is to cultivate not merely a place of residence, but a genuine, nurturing home, Victoria elucidated as we settled into her opulent office to discuss the contractual intricacies. Our esteemed residents retain their cherished independence, yet receive every conceivable measure of support they require. The price, predictably, was commensurate with the unparalleled level of service, precisely twice the cost of Golden Years. But with Alice's astonishing inheritance, I could finally afford it. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I experienced the profound satisfaction of making a decision purely for myself, uninfluenced by the dictates or expectations of another. Upon our return home, we discovered Susan and Edie awaiting us, their faces alight with urgent news. "Orson's here," Susan announced the moment we crossed the threshold. "He was at Golden Years, making inquiries about your whereabouts." Then, he inexplicably proceeded to the police station. "The police?" A wave of icy dread washed over me. "Why, for heaven's sake?" "He intended to file a missing persons report," Edie clarified, a smug, knowing smile playing on her lips. However, it was meticulously explained to him that an adult of sound legal capacity possesses the inherent right to depart without notifying their family, particularly if a note has been left. "What note?" I stared at her, utterly perplexed. Edie's smile widened, radiating unadulterated triumph. "The one I thoughtfully deposited in your room at Golden Years this very morning, my dear." It stated, "Dear Orson, I have decided to embark upon a brief vacation. Do not be concerned. I am perfectly well. I shall contact you when I am prepared." And yes, my dear, it is indisputably in your handwriting. Or, at least, remarkably similar. "Edie," I exclaimed, torn between horrified astonishment and unadulterated delight. "That's forgery." "It's merely a resourceful defense of a dear friend," she shrugged, completely unperturbed. "Besides, you are perfectly well, and you will indeed contact him when you are prepared." I merely expedited the process. Over the course of the ensuing week, we meticulously implemented every facet of our plan. I completed all the necessary paperwork for my relocation to Seaside Gardens, established a new bank account, and deposited precisely half of Alice's inheritance into it. The remainder was prudently divided between a secure safety deposit box and a discreet, small cash stash within the confines of my new apartment. The day I officially moved into Seaside Gardens, I finally resolved to accept Orson's incessant calls. Orson, my voice, to my own surprise, sounded remarkably calmer than I had anticipated. "Mom?" His exhalation of relief was almost audible through the phone line. "Oh, thank God. Where in the world are you?" "I've been absolutely consumed with worry." "I am safe," I stated calmly. "And I know, Orson. I heard everything." A silence so protracted descended upon the line that I wondered if the connection had been severed. What are you referring to?" he finally managed to stammer, though the conviction in his voice had perceptibly wavered. "I'm referring to your illuminating conversation with Gabrielle. To your meticulously crafted plans to appropriate my money and then dispatch me to a state-run nursing home. To your chilling calculations regarding my remaining lifespan. 5 years, or perhaps 10, if I were exceedingly fortunate. The silence stretched once more, then a quiet, strained voice emerged from the receiver. Mom, please, I can explain. There is no need, I interrupted him, my voice firm. I grasped the entirety of the situation that night. That is precisely why I left. It's not what you imagine, he interjected frantically, as if fearing I would terminate the call. Gabby, she was simply distraught, uttering foolish, nonsensical things. We would never contemplate such an action. But you agreed, Orson. I felt a familiar lump forming in my throat, a physical manifestation of my deep hurt. I distinctly heard you say, okay, heard your solemn promise to convince me to relinquish the money. I was merely attempting to mollify her. His voice was laced with an almost desperate plea. We are indeed navigating a precarious financial situation, but I would never, ever intentionally cause you harm, Mom. Never. It is too late, Orson, I sighed, the weariness suddenly profound. The damage has already been inflicted. I can no longer extend my trust to you. We arranged to meet in 2 days at a waterfront cafe, a public, neutral venue where he would be unable to exert undue pressure. I requested Lynette and Edie to accompany me, and they assented without a moment's hesitation. Orson arrived precisely at the appointed time, alone, as I had stipulated, without Gabrielle. He appeared gaunt, dark circles deeply etched beneath his eyes, his usually impeccable stubble unkempt, a stark contrast to the polished middle manager he had presented himself as just a few weeks prior. Mom, he lunged towards me, attempting an embrace, but I subtly pulled away. I am so utterly delighted to see you. Sit down, Orson, I instructed, indicating the chair directly opposite me. I would like you to meet my friends, Lynette and Edie. He nodded stiffly at them, clearly discomfited by their presence. I had hoped we might speak privately. That is not an option, I cut him off, my voice resolute. It is either this or nothing. Mom, I simply must explain that conversation. Gabby was beside herself. We had just received a final notice from the bank regarding a potential mortgage foreclosure. She was saying things she truly did not mean. And what of you? I stared directly into his eyes. Did you also utter words you did not truly mean? He lowered his gaze. I was weak. Frightened. I agreed, yes, to placate her. But I would never have brought the plan to fruition. Never. How remarkably convenient, Edie observed dryly from beside me. One can always conveniently disavow the intent behind one's spoken words, can't one? Mom, I love you. You are my only mother. How could you possibly entertain the notion that I would be capable of harming you? Because I heard it with my own ears, Orson, I stated calmly, my voice unwavering. You willingly went along with Gabrielle's despicable scheme. You failed to protect me. I was wrong. He reached across the table, his hand outstretched, attempting to grasp my palm, but I instinctively recoiled. I was weak, confused. We are, undeniably, in a truly precarious financial situation. Gabby expended far too much on her business, which, regrettably, never began to generate revenue. We have 3 outstanding, delinquent loans, and the bank is actively threatening to foreclose on the house. And that, I stated, my voice devoid of question, a stark declaration of fact, is why you decided to exploit me. No, I mean, he stammered, visibly flustered. Gabby merely suggested I ask you for assistance. That is all. I understand it sounds awful, but she truly did not mean. She did, I interjected firmly, my gaze unwavering. Every single word. And you, Orson, you assented to her proposition. I have relocated Orson, I informed him, to a new assisted living facility, far superior to Golden Years. I am safe there, and my well-being is assured. That's good, he nodded, still unable to meet my gaze. I am truly happy for you, Mom. And I am not providing you with any funds, I continued, my voice measured and firm. Not now and not ever. Alice's inheritance represents my singular opportunity for independence and a dignified old age. I will not permit it to be wrested from me. He flinched as if struck by a physical blow. An inheritance from Aunt Alice? His eyes widened in stunned comprehension. So that's where the how much? That is precisely none of your concern, Lynette interjected sharply from her seat. That money belongs exclusively to your mother. I was merely inquiring, he protested, raising his hands in a defensive gesture. I didn't even know Aunt Alice had passed away. Why didn't you inform me, Mom? Because you have demonstrated virtually no genuine interest in my life over the course of the past several years, Orson. The bitterness, long suppressed, surged within me. Monthly phone calls, perfunctory visits on holidays. I had effectively been relegated to a mere item on your obligatory to-do list, not a cherished individual. What transpires now? He finally asked, his voice laced with resignation. Are you simply going to sever all ties with me? I sighed. Despite the searing pain and profound disappointment he had inflicted, I found myself unable to completely relinquish my son. He was, undeniably, my blood, an inseparable part of my very being. No, Orson. But circumstances will be irrevocably altered. No more unannounced visits, no more discussions concerning finances. If you genuinely desire to remain a part of my life, you will be compelled to unequivocally demonstrate that I can, once again, extend my trust to you. And Gabby, he inquired, a flicker of apprehension in his eyes. I have no desire whatsoever to see Gabrielle. My voice was firm, leaving no room for negotiation. Ever. He nodded, a defeated acceptance of my terms etched upon his face. When the time came to bid farewell, he hesitantly attempted to hug me, and this time, I permitted it. A brief, formal embrace, utterly devoid of the warmth that had once characterized our connection. The ensuing months unfolded as a period of profound adjustment and unexpected discovery. Seaside Gardens proved to be precisely the sanctuary I had so desperately needed, a tranquil, exquisitely comfortable environment populated by respectful staff and engaging, intellectually stimulating neighbors. My spacious ocean view apartment, with its expansive windows, became a genuine haven, a comfortable living room, a bedroom boasting an incredibly plush bed, and a compact kitchen where I could indulge my culinary whims when I chose not to descend to the communal restaurant. Orson, true to his word, telephoned every week. Our conversations, though unfailingly polite, remained inherently superficial. Edie, with her astute predictions, proved remarkably accurate. Precisely 1 month after our contentious meeting, Orson telephoned, his voice now laced with undisguised desperation, requesting financial assistance. The bank has issued an eviction date, Mom. His voice trembled uncontrollably. We're on the verge of losing the house. I'm not asking for a substantial sum, merely a small loan to buy us some precious time. No, Orson, I stated, my voice unwavering, absolute. We explicitly discussed this. No more talk of money. But Mom. No. I interrupted him, my voice firm. You must sell the house yourselves before it escalates to an eviction. Locate a more modest dwelling. Begin to live strictly within your financial means. He did not call for 2 full weeks following that definitive conversation. When he finally did, he informed me, with a distinct note of defeat in his voice, that he and Gabrielle had indeed decided to sell the house and relocate to an apartment. She, he explained, was utterly furious and had unequivocally assigned all blame to me, but they had been left with no viable alternative. Meanwhile, at Seaside Gardens, I discovered a new, unexpected family. I became fast friends with Carlos, a distinguished former literature professor who presided over a lively weekly book club, Mary, the erudite widow of an admiral whose captivating tales of global travels effortlessly suspended the concept of time, and Tom, a jovial former chef who, on occasion, generously imparted his culinary wisdom through informal cooking classes for the residents. Lynette, Susan, and Edie visited frequently. We hosted delightful tea parties on my private terrace, overlooking the vast, shimmering expanse of the ocean, engaged in lively card games, and enthusiastically dissected the latest books and films. These were the most joyful hours of my days, precious time spent in the company of individuals who cherished me for who I inherently was, not for what I might potentially offer them. One evening, as we sat on the terrace, bathed in the resplendent hues of a fading sunset, Susan, with her characteristic spontaneity, suddenly proposed, "What if we embarked upon a grand adventure? All of us together. A trip." I looked at her, genuinely surprised. "To where, pray tell?" "To Europe." Her eyes sparkled with unbridled enthusiasm. I have always yearned to behold Paris, to wander the ancient streets of Rome, to bask in the vibrant energy of Barcelona. We could secure charming apartments through these newfangled rental services, travel entirely at our own leisure. At our age, Edie interjected, her tone skeptical, yet a nascent flicker of interest already dancing in her eyes. "Why ever not?" Lynette seconded the audacious idea, her voice brimming with a newfound zeal. "My dear girls, we are hardly getting any younger. If not now, then when?" I pondered her words, a profound realization dawning upon me. I possessed the means. The financial gift Alice had so unexpectedly bestowed upon me was meant to facilitate a life lived to its absolute fullest, not merely an existence. Why not, I reasoned, utilize a portion of it to fulfill a long-cherished, seemingly impossible dream? "You know," I said, my voice softer now, tinged with a nostalgic melancholy, "Rex and I had always meticulously planned to journey to Italy after his retirement, to immerse ourselves in the timeless beauty of Florence, the ethereal charm of Venice, the rustic allure of Tuscany. But then he fell ill," Lynette finished for me, her eyes filled with understanding, "and, alas, the plan remained merely a plan. So perhaps," she continued, looking at me with a gentle, knowing gaze, "it is finally time to breathe life into those long-dormant plans. Wouldn't you agree?" We spent the remainder of the evening consumed by the exhilarating process of planning our epic journey, meticulously compiling lists of cities we yearned to explore, spiritedly debating itineraries, and erupting in gales of laughter at the delightful absurdity of four mature American women embarking upon their first grand conquest of Europe. For the first time in what felt like an immeasurable age, I experienced a genuine thrill, an intoxicating anticipation of the grand adventure that awaited. When my friends finally departed, I remained seated on the terrace, cradling a warm cup of tea, gazing out at the vast, murmuring expanse of the night ocean. My phone vibrated discreetly. Orson was calling. My first instinct was to ignore it, to let it ring unanswered, but an inexplicable impulse prompted me to pick it up. "Mom?" His voice, when it finally came, sounded strangely taut, brittle. I had desperately hoped you would answer." "What is wrong, Orson?" A faint tremor of anxiety stirred within me. He stammered, his words stumbling, "I need your help, Mom. Gabby and we've separated. She left with her yoga instructor. And she took most of our savings. I'm not sure what to do." I closed my eyes, a maelstrom of conflicting emotions warring within me, a deep-seated sympathy for my son, yet simultaneously, a profound weariness born of bitter, hard-won experience. "I am truly sorry, Orson," I said at last, my voice carefully modulated. "But if you are calling for money—" "No," he interrupted me, his voice sharp with desperation. "I mean, yes, I do need money, but not yours. I was wondering if you might be able to help me look for an apartment in South Bethany. Something modest, inexpensive. I'm seriously contemplating relocating there. To start anew. To be closer to you." I remained silent, uncertain how to respond. A part of me, the eternally hopeful maternal part, yearned to believe this was a sincere desire to rebuild our fractured relationship. Yet another, more cynical part, rooted in recent memory, whispered that this was merely another sophisticated manipulation. "I understand if you are unwilling to help," he added quietly, his voice now tinged with genuine vulnerability. "After everything that has transpired. But I genuinely wish to change, Mom. To become a better person. And I need your support. Not financial support, just knowing you are there for me." I stared out at the inky blackness of the ocean, my thoughts drifting to the imminent journey, to my newfound friends, to the profound sense of liberation I had so recently discovered. The unwavering conviction settled within me. True family is not always defined by the bonds of blood, but by those remarkable individuals who steadfastly choose to be present for you, who perceive you as a unique individual, not as a mere means to an end. I will consider your request, Orson, I said finally, my voice holding a note of gentle firmness. Call me in a week. At this precise moment, I am rather occupied with preparations for my upcoming trip. A trip? He sounded genuinely surprised, a flicker of genuine curiosity in his tone. Where are you going? Europe, I replied, a subtle smile gracing my lips. With my friends. We are determined to see the world while we still possess the capacity to do so. That's truly wonderful, Mom. His voice was imbued with an unmistakable, unfeigned happiness. You absolutely deserve it. When our conversation concluded, I remained seated on the terrace, listening to the rhythmic murmur of the waves and contemplating the strange, unpredictable convolutions of fate. At 75 years old, my life had metamorphosed in ways I could never have possibly imagined. I had shed my naive illusions about the sanctity of family, yet in their place, I had discovered true, steadfast friends. I had survived a profound betrayal, but in doing so, I had unearthed an unparalleled freedom. I remained uncertain if I could ever fully forgive Orson, or if I could ever again extend my complete trust to him. I was equally uncertain whether his newfound desire for change was genuinely sincere or merely another expertly crafted attempt at manipulation. But one truth, one undeniable certainty, resonated deeply within me. I was no longer invisible. I was not a voiceless old woman to be carelessly ignored and ruthlessly exploited. I was Bree Hayes, a woman possessing an unyielding will of her own, an inherent right to happiness, and a life unequivocally worth living. And absolutely no one could ever wrest that from me.